Hello and welcome back. For this part, we're going to focus on the libraries. What that means is if your foot was one drawing, it would have a library of different poses. If your hand is one piece, it has a library of different poses, and then your mouth, and then sometimes your eyes. So stuff that you will swap between in a substitution window would be considered a library. I've already prepped my file with sketches of each of the things that I'm going to be tracing over. Normally, if you're working on a show, you would have these provided. For the first set, we have different hands for the rotation, and then we have just some extra hands to throw in there. I simplified the design for these hands down to have just a very simple circular, like elongated circular shape, just so when people try and replicate the hands, because preferably you're going to be drawing your own hands, these are just stand-ins. When you're drawing these hands, you just have to put in this little circle for the nail. Next, we have the front mouth. So we have the default closed mouth. We're going to go through and have a set of happy mouths, well, all of the different poses. So like this would be like a f sound, like an F, or a V. This would be like an sound, like an L. We have all the happy mouths, and then we have a similar set of sad mouths. You can also draw neutral mouths, but most of the time people don't speak with neutral expressions, at least in my experience. So you're either going to be happy or you're going to have a slight grumpy face. So I tend to not do neutral faces. And then we have the exact same thing in the profile view. So these are all the profile happy mouths and then the profile side mouths. I set my camera, so my camera is zooming in on the areas we're going to focus in, just so when we render, we can see what's up. And you can kind of see here, I listed what each of these mouths are going to be for. Like this is for S's and C's, this is A's and E's, this is for ah sound, GK, ooh, if you need an example for this, if you're making your own rig, just Google lip charts or lip sync charts. You'll find like a million different versions, and most of the mouths kind of depend on you. So some people would include more mouths, some people would include less, some will just have some of these mouths. So these three are practically the same shape. The lip is just lowering, kind of. So you could just have this as one shape with a deformer and then deform it every time, but I find it just easier to have the three shapes. For this first part with the hands, this is all just going to be drawings. They're very simple. I'm going to just draw the base hands, and then I'm going to come back and we'll talk about separating the fingers so you can hold objects between them. Alright, so the hands are all drawn. What we're going to do out the gate is start to rename all of the ones from the turnaround. So the first 8 or 10, we're going to call T1. Then T2, T3, T4. By the time we go, so T1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the reverse hands, so like the hands that are going to be on behind the body, that would normally be on the stage right hand, that's going to be T6, 7, 8. And then back to 9 or 1. Next, we're going to give everything its texture. We're going to turn on this option, apply to all frames. In tool options, we're going to go bumpy. We're going to go back over to edit gradient, and we're going to double the length. So now all of the hands should have that effect. Next, we're going to fill in everything, but we're going to fill it in on the line so we can grab it and shift it down, just so we can deal with these nails, because these might be a bit annoying if we move them now. So we have to grab the hand. We're going to grab everything and shift it down to the color art. With that done, we're going to now have to go in and change the color of anything inside of the hand. So this line, we're going to have to change the color of that to the hand line color. If you're lucky and they're separated like this, you can just select it, find the color, and then fill it in. But if you have something like this, where it continues past that line, what we can do is, if we hold T, normally this is what we do to delete stuff by swiping, but if we hold it down, drag just over where we want it to be separated, and then drag around the entire shape, and then while still holding T, come over and then click the line color, and it'll change the color. This does cause a little bit of issues sometimes if you cut something at like such an angle. So you can drag select over all of the lines, and then over in your tool properties, your start and your end of your line are going to be flat, so you can round them out like so. And if you have this kind of layering, so this is behind this, which is behind this, you can just cut it and put it back. Now that the hands are done, we're going to have to go through and separate them into the underlay layers. So currently this is on the line art and the color art, which is all this group. And then the underlay is a layer that we can move and shift around and put objects between. Something like this shape. We would want this to be either on the underlay or the line art and color art, depending on where it is. So we have the underlay set up, so it's behind everything. For this drawing, this section would be on the underlay. For this drawing, this section will be on the underlay. You don't have to do it for every hand. Again, people can also come in and kind of alter this as they go along, but I've made some specific hands for holding things and grappling stuff. So this hand, for example, I'm going to go through and separate those layers. So we're going to use this for the example. Now with this hand separated, we have a front and a back. If we make an object or a prop, plug it between the two. I prefer to have it on the outside of the group, but we'll sort that out later when we're organizing everything. Make a prop, connect it by the peg to the hand, and then just draw a line. And now it's being held by the hand. So do this to any hand that you think needs it, but you don't have to go crazy. People can do it themselves as they're working on it. And sometimes people don't even have this, they just have an extra drawing that if they need a character to hold something at any point, or to have their hand laid on a table if they're leaning on a table, they can just copy the hand onto the new drawing and then layer it down. Because most of the time if you're leaning on something and you're layering it like that, you're not going to be moving it. So it's nice to have it as like a whole separate entity. But that should do it for our hands. And let's move on to the mounts. For the mount, we're going to come back in and turn our mount back on. We can also, just to be a bit more tidy, disconnect anything we're not using so it's not taking up space in the timeline. So the thing we want to do with the mount, we want the mount to be as consistent as possible, because the drawings that we have, we kind of look at them from over here, the teeth are moving, the lips are moving, like nothing is generally consistent. We want all of that to be consistent. We don't want this lip to be going too high compared to where it is. Like we only want it to stay where it is, and we only want the bottom of the mouth to move because the jaw is moving with it. There is some exceptions like this mouth. This is a very puckered mouth, so you can move the lips, and especially the top teeth. You want the teeth to always be in the exact same location up top, because that part of your skull doesn't move. So the only thing that should be moving in the mouth is the lower teeth and the tongue. So to keep that consistent, we're going to be using the original mouth as the template. And we're going to delete this example mouth that we've done. Let's remember how our hierarchy works. We have the mouth shape, so everything on the outside and the inside of the mouth on the overlay. We have the upper teeth on the line art. We have the lower teeth on the color art, and then we have the tongue on the underlay. For this part, we're only going to be drawing the mouth. We're not going to be drawing the teeth or the tongue. So everything we're going to do at the start is on the overlay. So we're going to copy this mouth. We're going to go to our next mouth. We're going to make a blank drawing, and we're going to paste the mouth in. So for this mouth, we're going to grab everything on the bottom. We're going to start pulling it down, and we're going to start drawing this lower mouth shape. The actual line for the mouth is quite big, so we're going to bring it back to a 2. Remember, when you change everything in a group like that, anything that was a 2 is now going to be brought down. Be careful about mass changing line sizes. The mouth example is a bit off because when scaling it, I didn't scale it to the original mouth shape. So we're going to kind of be eyeballing it. Generally, it's going to match up a bit better. Once we get past these initial 3 opening mouth poses, it's quite handy because a lot of the other mouths, the only thing that changes are the internal mouths. So for example, this mouth with the tongue behind the teeth is just the second open mouth. Now that the outside of the mouth is made and filled in, we're going to now do the upper teeth, which should just be one single drawing that does not move. And that's the teeth. Just go through and copy and put them on pretty much all the mouths. I think we can actually, for the first one, we want the teeth to fill the entire mouth, like so. A bit too down on the lower one, so we're just going to adjust and paste. You can bring them up for the ooh and ah mouths, just because that's generally how they look. They're a bit weird. And then again for the sound, the lip bite, the teeth are going to cover the entire mouth. Let's just turn these white so we can get a better example. And we kind of don't want the mouth to start touching the teeth much because it kind of looks like they've got a bit of a lisp thing going on. So you can come in and adjust the mouth however you need. We're going to also just start adjusting the colors. I originally left these as very vibrant colors because I didn't have a reference. I'm just gonna kind of wing it for now. The inside of the mouth is either the same color as the line is the mouth, depending on the aesthetic, or it's just a bit darker, like that. Another thing that also helps is kind of widening the mouth. This character is quite realistic, so it feels a bit weird doing that, but I think it looks good. A lot of cartoony characters, the mouths will get wider as they open. And now back to the teeth, we're going to grab upper teeth on the line art. We're going to go to the color art, paste, flip them around, move them down. And then because there's kind of an angle going on with this character's mouth, we're going to just bring it down in the center. And then same procedure as before, we're just going to go through and place the teeth where they need to be. And now onto the tongue, which is the underlay. If you remember, we have two different tongue colors. One is if the tongue in this example will be behind the teeth, and then if the tongue in this example will be in front of the teeth. This can be a super simple ellipse. We can also leave tongues inside the mouth out of view, because we can always just grab the peg for the tongue and move it around if we need to. For the squished mouth, we're going to kind of make the tongue a bit smaller. And then now for this tongue, we're going to take it, but we're going to use the exterior color. We're going to change the exterior color so it's the same color. And then we can minimize and squash it so we have this bit tongue shape. I think this mouth is a bit cramped, so we might actually get rid of the overlay, grab the bigger mouth. And then for this last mouth, it's just a normal tongue, but in the front. So change the color, bring the tongue up, and then squish it and extend it a bit. That should be pretty much every mount you need. If you need another mount, so say example, you need a mount like this, but it has a tongue. The tongue is already there, so all you have to do is bring it up, and then now you have that mount. The one thing I would say is limiting about a mount like this is instead of having each of the individual sections as one just drawing that we're now posing into these different shapes, that's best if you have a character that's going to be looking up and in different directions, so we can change the shape of these teeth, or you can change them by hand, but it's just easier if they're all one solid piece. I just think for simple animation, having substitutions is just way easier to just go, I need this mount, there you go, instead of posing it or using a pose copier. I think one change we're going to do is shrink everything. I think for the original design, the front mount looks good, but for all of these other mounts, it kind of feels like they take up a bit too much area on her face compared to how the mounts look on her reference. So I'm going to actually just shrink everything down. So to do that, we just need to select one of the mounts. We can select apply to all frames, so that means if it's exposed, it'll select it, and then to all layers, so it selects every layer. Yeah, I think the small amount works a lot better. Okay, so if you were watching that entire thing, I went through and I made a lot of adjustments, moved stuff around, kind of made it fit a lot better. So because the default mount on the rig didn't really line up with the mount from the reference that I drew, I kind of tried to find the middle ground, but then the mount looked a bit too small for the teeth, so then I stretched the mount out a bit. I even just grabbed the entire overlay and would stretch it from top to bottom just to kind of give a lot more breathing room to the different poses and shapes, and it kind of like works a bit better. It looks like her mouth is kind of physically moving and shaping. As long as the upper teeth stay exactly in the same place, then you're gravy. Now we're going to go through and just do all of the sad mounts. The front mount is all done. We're going to go through and just label them. So all of the happy ones are going to be happy underscore 01, 02, 03, 04, you know. And then all of the sad ones are going to be S underscore 01, 02, 03. We've come across a problem where when we cycle through our happy mounts, it then immediately goes to our profile happy because they both start to a H in the drawing substitution window. So we're actually going to just go through and rename them to, FH, so front H, front sad, profile H, profile sad. With everything labeled, we can now move on to the profile mount. First thing we're going to do is exact same way we set it up last time. We're just going to make blank keyframes and we're going to go along the mounts until we have them all done, and then we'll come back and figure out what to do with the inside of the mount. The side mount is going to consist of not only the upper lip but also this ridge that is going to come in and then reconnect to the mount. The shape is going to look something like this. If you remember the first time we built the mount, we talked about solving an issue later on. This is that issue. We are going to try and make it so the inside of this profile mount cuts away at the head while the front facing mounts don't cut away. In order to do that, we're going to make another color selector. We're going to plug it in to the overlay, and we're going to apply a new color. In the same way, this color selector has the mount interior. This one is also going to have a mount interior, but it's going to be a completely different color called a mount cut. It can be any color you want. It's not going to be plugged in. If we were to plug it in, it would fill in like this. It would just be a blank color. But what we want to do is we want it to leave the group of the head, and then we want it to come over and cut the jaw and the cranium. You can get away with it only cutting the jaw, just to be safe. I'd cut both of them. Just a normal cutter directly under the both of them. Which means that when you're making these mounts, you're going to use the mount cut palette on the profile and the mount int interior on the front view. To make the teeth and the tongue visible the same way the front mount interior is cutting into the interior objects, we're just going to put a composite in and then plug the new interior in as well. And now all of these objects will be able to move around while it's cutting away the head. But you have to make sure that the objects don't go past where that visible shape is, because then they'll start to get cut. Just make sure both interior colors are cutting the interior objects. And that's the mount done. One thing I would like to point out with the color selectors is they don't register if you have a texture on your line. So unlike a color override where you can kind of implant the texture into the color override so it appears, the color selector has no option for that. I don't know if there's a workaround. I haven't been able to find one. So even though you can see the texture in the OpenGL, once you go to render, that texture will go. So for this mount, having so many color overrides, we're gonna have to kind of take that sacrifice. But to be honest, from like a distance away, it's not even noticeable. Even close up, it's not super noticeable as well. So that's just something we're gonna have to deal with. And that is all of our libraries drawn. We have our hands done, we have our front mounts and our profile mount. The back and back 3/4 views don't have a visible face, so there's no point of doing mounts for those. And the front quarter view face can just have the front mount, but we're going to shift all of the internal objects over and then just slightly squish it. Saves us a lot of time of having a bunch of different mounts that you have to cycle through. We're now going to just go through and start assigning them to the actual turnaround. So the front view should be perfectly fine. You should be able to cycle through all of the front mounts. And then we're going to go to our profile view. We also want this to be our front mount, but we're just going to skew it in a little bit, not too much, because we don't want the lines to show that it's being skewed. So we're just going to squeeze it in a little bit. And by opening up the mount, we're going to go and grab our internal pieces and just on the peg, shift them over by 1 or 2. I'd say 1 works for this. And then just cycle through the mount and make sure all of those work. And then when we get to our profile, we can just go to happy 1, make sure all of those work. They should be perfect. And with our mounts done and posed, we're going to go through and do each of our turnaround hands. We have come across a very common issue when it comes to hand libraries. A lot of the time, they're drawn and rigged the wrong way. So if you're looking at this hand, drawing it looks fine, rigging it looks fine, and then when you actually put it on the turner and you realize the thumb is in the wrong direction. Happens a lot. Same with these pack hands. The hands are practically flipped around. So in this scenario, if you're lucky, you can just flip it. So in this scenario, you can just kind of flip them and pray they work. A lot of the times they'll have some weird issues with them. And you get stuff like this. This hand was actually kind of messed up on purpose because I liked the way it looked, but now flipping it the other direction doesn't look very good. So we're just gonna fix this. And the hands are fit. And that's it for a substitution or library, depending on what you like to call it. If I just hit play, I'll be able to cycle through. There we go. With these done, the last episode is just going to be cleaning up the file, how to prepare it for submission if you were, working with a client or working for a studio, or even just how to tidy up the file for yourself, and especially how to tidy the file for master controls. I'm going to do that as kind of more of a bonus video because after you clean up the file, practically done, you shouldn't really do master controls until you've tested the rig for animation and the file is completely clean and finished, because if you change one thing, it will affect the master control. We're going to go through the X sheet and keys, all of that good stuff for how to clean up the file. For now, thanks for watching. See you next time.